History of the discovery of the thalamus. The thalamus was named by Aelius Galenus. He was a prominent surgeon, physician, and philosopher in about 145 AD. The thalamus was considered a part of the dicephalon in the 14th century. The first illustrations appeared in the 17th century, and it was finally seen as a sensory receptor in the 18th century. During the 19th century, intense experimentation and dissection of the thalamus occurred. The liaisons and thalamus nuclei were discovered. Soon after, more discoveries were made about the immense properties of the thalamus. Properties of the thalamus, especially those relating to psychology, are still being discovered today.
The brain is composed of many parts. They are defined by their locations, functions, and anatomy. The thalamus is a structure in the middle of the brain. It's located between the cerebral cortex and the midbrain. It works to correlate several important processes, including consciousness, sleep, and sensory interpretation. The human brain on average weighs about 3 pounds. The top of the brain is divided into 2 hemispheres. The bottom of the brain is connected to the spinal cord by the brain stem. If you were able to split the brain directly down the center, you would find the thalamus sitting at the top of the brainstem. The thalamus is composed of 2 parts, often referred to as lobes. These lobes are symmetrical and are about the size of a walnut. Have you ever called an organization and reached someone who is a switchboard operator? A switchboard operator is responsible for receiving information, interpreting the information, and making the proper connections to send and receive information. In the brain, the thalamus serves like a switchboard operator.
The thalamus is a small structure located at the top of the brainstem between the cerebral cortex and the midbrain. The main function of the thalamus is to relay sensory signals to the cerebral cortex. The thalamus also controls alertness and motor control. It is often called the switchboard of the brain. The nature side of the thalamus is what it was genetically built with, its receptors, nuclei, and main functions. The nurture side of the thalamus is its ability to have muscle memory, along with recognizing different sights and sounds.
The thalamus is subdivided into a number of nuclei that possess functional specializations for dealing with particular types of information. For example, all sensory information except olfaction travels directly from sensory receptors to a nucleus in the thalamus specialized for dealing with that type of sensory data. Then the information is sent from the thalamus to the appropriate area of the cortex where it is further processed. As many as 50 distinct nuclei have been identified in the thalamus, but I will discuss just a few of the better known nuclei in this video. Each of these nuclei has multiple functions. I will only mention 1 or 2 of the best known functions here. At the anterior of the thalamus is a nucleus called the anterior nucleus. It is extensively connected to the hippocampus and is thought to be involved in memory. The dorsomedial nucleus is thought to be involved in emotional behavior and memory. The ventral anterior nucleus and ventrolateral nucleus are thought to be involved in motor functions. The ventral posterolateral nucleus, or VPL, and the ventral posteromedial nucleus, or VPM, both act as relay nuclei for sending somatosensory information to the somatosensory cortex. The lateral posterior nucleus is thought to be involved with integrating sensory input and associating it with cognitive functions. The pulvinar nucleus is a large nucleus that is involved in processing visual stimuli. The medial geniculate nucleus and the lateral geniculate nucleus serve as important relays for auditory and visual information, respectively. The reticular nucleus forms a sheet that makes up the outer covering of the thalamus. It influences the activity of other nuclei within the thalamus. There are also a number of nuclei not visible in this image, such as the centromedian nucleus, which is thought to be involved in attention and arousal.
Diseases and malfunctions of the thalamus. Atrophy of the thalamus is a decrease in its size. It is seen in many neurodegenerative conditions. Some of these conditions include Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. It is common to see atrophy of the thalamus in schizophrenia. The degree of atrophy is related to the third ventricle size. The CSF flow is affected, arteries are shrunken, and it makes the brain susceptible to damage. Inflammation and swelling can even occur. Multiple sclerosis is also connected to atrophy of the thalamus. Overall symptoms include blurriness, loss of vision, memory and sensation loss, behavioral changes, disturbed sleep, and many more. Thalamic pain syndrome, or Dejeron-Roussy syndrome, is a condition developed after a thalamic stroke. Damage to the thalamus and CNS are the causes of this syndrome. Numbness and loss of sensation can occur, but the after symptoms are Dejeron-Roussy. Numbness is replaced by burning and tingling sensations. The condition developed due to liaisons interfering with the sensory process. Hypersensitivity can also occur. In extreme cases, paralysis of one side of the body occurs. Other diseases include movement disorders, ataxia, pain syndrome, visual disorders, and a variety of neuropsychological conditions, and even comas. Two psychologists who made advances in the psychological field because of their work with the thalamus were Walter Bradford Cannon and Philip Bard. They developed the Cannon-Bard theory. This theory states that arousal and emotions emerge simultaneously during perception of certain things. For example, when a person sees a snake, at the same time their body tenses and they feel afraid. These events are connected and not independent. The thalamus is responsible for emotional response stimuli and emotional expression. We react to stimuli and experience emotions at the same time. More proof of this theory is when the thalamus was taken out of animals, they no longer had the same response to stimuli. In conclusion, the thalamus is vital in emotional and behavioral response.
Physiology influences emotions. It was actually a compilation of work from Walter Cannon, 1871 to 1945, and Philip Bard, 1898 to 1977. Their theory was that we simultaneously experience emotions and physiological reactions. Physiological reactions are reactions of the body, such as muscle tension, sweating, and trembling. Essentially, their hypothesis is that emotions result when brain systems, such as the thalamus, signals a response to a stimulus. Among other things, the thalamus influences motor control, auditory or visual signals, and the sending of sensory signals. The end result is the physiological reaction. For example, if you see a spider, you become afraid, and at the same time, you may scream or tremble. Walter Cannon criticized the James Lange theory, which hypothesized that emotion is not directly caused by the perception of an event, but by the body's response caused by the event. Through experimentation, Cannon discovered that emotion occurs even if the brain was not connected to information about body responses. He also argued that body responses are similar. For example, your heart races whether you are excited or angry. Those are two different emotions, but the body's reaction is the same. Philip Bard agreed with Cannon, and together they concluded the experience of emotion does not depend on input from the body and how it responds. Again, the experience of emotions and physiological responses occur at the same time, but not because of physiological responses. There are several theories to explain how emotions occur, but there are only three that are the foundation of research and discussion. The first and oldest is the James Lange theory, which states we first experience body responses that correspond with emotion.
The sense of smell doesn't pass through the thalamus. The thalamus is the size of a walnut or a bullet. Thalamus is coined from the Greek word thalamos, meaning chamber.